if they see that you're somebody who they're not going to agree with a lot,
Mhm.
and they probably won't enjoy your content, they'll let themselves out the door, you know.
Yeah.
But if you try to play both sides of every issue and try to make everybody happy, you're just going to wind up with a group of people around you who will cancel you and throw you under the bus at the first opportunity.
For me, that's what the issue is.
Well, and here's where I think you and I might disagree slightly.
Mhm.
Is to me, this stuff is rooted in politics. It's rooted in Marxist subversion of our culture. It's about trying to take the West down a peg,
Mhm.
and and so I think you have to basically start there with talking about it, bringing attention to it, and talking about what these people who are doing it, what first of all what they're doing, why they're doing it. You can go straight to their Twitter accounts and you can see that they are communist
Mhm.
and they have an agenda, and that's what they're trying to push. Um, and it's like there's a famous quote by Andrew Breitbart. He said right before he died, he said that politics is downstream from culture. So
Mhm.
if we want to win the political battle long term for this country to stop the United States from becoming a communist country, it starts with protecting our hobbies. It protecting, to basically stopping them from going any farther. And it's like what you said, not giving them your money, very important. But you also have to, like I said, you have to talk about it. You have to point it out.
Yeah, but that's only one part of the fraction of the many other things that have to be done too, right? It's like, yes, you can say, without Andrew Breitbart, you can say politics downstream of culture, but what is culture downstream of? Because there's a downstream for culture, right? Like culture doesn't just happen out of nowhere; it comes from something, and the only place you can
Hmm.
point to is the people themselves, right? So, what is it about the people themselves on their tribalism? Because we're all still at that space and the tribalism scale where we aren't getting past in that essence. I know it's kind of deep, but we we could talk about it all day long. But what's the after? Right? There has to be an after. There has to be an after conversation. There has to be an after not giving one company your money. Right? It has to be. It almost has to be a down collapse of all the big companies, right? I don't care if they make a good game or not. You kind
Hmm.
of have to make an example. You have to be mobbish about it. Like
Yeah, you're right.
the mafia themselves, right? I mean, independent is a different thing, but like the mafia themselves, like they wouldn't joke around. If you were in trouble, you were in trouble. And I don't see that coming from other content creators. Let's talk, yeah, bring attention, sure. But what's the next step? What's after that? Because I'm not seeing that. I'm just seeing talk about and pointing out, like, oh, look, there's a falling star. Okay, what's next?
Hmm.
Oh, my camera's going fuzzy. Hold on. There we go.
Well, there's things that we have to do. So like we have to engage in building culture, right? The basically our hobbies have been infiltrated for so long that the communists have a huge head start on us. It might be impossible to root them out of the industries as they exist, but we can do stuff like like a lot of people have done, make their own comic books, or like Daily Wire is making their own comedy movies and kids TV shows and stuff. We have to try to you know, counter it by being creative artists in our own right, like even have being a streamer like you are, you're taking eyes away from people who otherwise would probably be watching TV and having their minds filled with basically propaganda. you
You can
know
still
well,
get that
you
online.
can watch Dharma instead, and you can be way more entertained, way more informed, uh you know and
I
we
don't know
go
if I'll
from
agree.
there.
Yeah.
you know there's and yeah, it's is like you said, man. It's an uphill battle. There's so much to it, and there's so much work to be done
Mhm.
that it seems like so daunting that a lot of people will just throw up their hands and say, "Well, we're screwed," you know.
Yeah,
This is just the
basically.
way it's gonna be. Like,
Because
like,
it's not a one concerted effort. It's a block by block by block. There's these many blocks effort. And yeah, like that can be great, but not everyone is on the same page. Everyone has different ideas, which is fine. But at the
mhm.
end of the day, I just don't see much action other than yeah, you have independent creators, that's fine. But what stops the people you're trying to get away from not getting into those things in the independent sphere, right? Other than like, well, if they make a comic and it doesn't do well, maybe that's a way. But what stops them from not getting into your community, right? Like independent creators make a community, right? So
Mhm.
what stops people from coming into there? You could gatekeep, sure, but the mindset is still there. The mindset has not changed. So what will prevent? Yeah.
Uh, well, I think being true to yourself and who you actually are, is probably a good way to start. That way, people will gatekeep themselves if they're just like, if they see that you're somebody who they're not going to agree with a lot,
Mhm.
and they probably won't enjoy your content, they'll let themselves out the door, you know.
Yeah.
But if you try to play both sides of every issue and try to make everybody happy, you're just going to wind up with a group of people around you who will cancel you and throw you under the bus at the first opportunity, you
Hmm.
know. So I that's what I would suggest, is be true to yourself and make sure that you are honest with the people around you about who you are and what you believe in and what your goals are.
Yeah.
And
I and while yeah, I can see that obviously because you kind of um because that honest self honesty is always the first step because that's where the beginning of change happens, right? Like it was it Gandhi or something like if you want to see change in the world, be the change yourself or something like that. Um, so you kind of have that motif, but at the end of the day, um, there's still going to there's still going to be that human factor, which we'll all focus focus you darn camera. There's always gonna, there's always going to be that human factor which you're not going to get rid of. I'm just sorry to say it's not going to dissipate. Um, so yeah, you have people out there who know how to play the psychological game, which is what can get you into those communities. If you play the long game long enough, you can create quite a havoc because people will have their biases towards people, ideas, or groups or whatever. Again, that's that tribalism factor, which we all humans still have. We all have,
Mhm.
confirmation bias. We all have cognitive dissonance. We're all still affected by those things because we're still human. I'm not saying going cyborg or anything, but we're still all human beings. So to say you'll fully get away from it is just an impossible issue because you never fully get away from it. You can only say watch for the signs or whatever, but even then, someone can still slip in under the radar and
Mhm.
be part of that community for a while, and at a certain point be like that sleeper cell, right? And just so it's
Yeah,
that
and
thing.
to be honest, it's not something that I would like to get away from completely. I don't want everybody
Yeah.
to go off into their own bubbles. You know, I still definitely enjoy talking to people who disagree with me because you learn a lot of things from
Uh,
listening to
I,
people who
I,
disagree with you or have a different perspective.
yeah.
You
No,
know?
that's why I do this. That's why I do this as well because I get to learn about people's perception and perspective on their view of the world. Right? It doesn't matter what of the view of the world. It just matters that there's a different view of the world, and that not only can deflate the ego or whatever, but it can, in essence, open yourself to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, that you may have a perception that's so in sync or not with that other person, and you get a different it's like that prism. Everyone has a
Hmm.
prism of themselves, and they just turn it just a little, and the light shines in a different direction or a different color comes out. Everyone has that. But the issue of it is it's harder to see it in ourselves and in other people, right? Like, you can say something
Hmm.
about some stupid person or whatever and point that silliness out, but in yourself, a lot harder, a lot harder. But no, that's why I do this, is because that also allows for a different take on perception of our world, whatever you are in, right? Like, you can have someone across the way as long as you can understand them. Because if you can't understand them, then it's sort of like it sort of makes that understanding a little hard of that perspective. But when you can,
Yeah.
you sort of get this. You sort of start stripping back the layers of identity or what we consider identity, because identity is it's like the memory thing, right? Like memories are things we built over time with people and all this stuff, and people change and all that. It's a very varied perspective aspect aspectual perspective, because then you learn that maybe my perspective is not always correct, maybe my perspective is quite vastly different from the next person, and maybe my perspective is limited in view because I've not gone beyond my scope. And it's not just one thing, it's many things,
Hmm.
right? That's how I see it. But again, that's why I also do this as well, because the perspectives are so vastly wide that you start to wonder yourself, like, man, have I been wrong about things this whole time? It's like, dang it.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's been a few times in my life where I've had to kind of sit down and think about, what it is that's really important to me and what it is that I actually believe, and
Mm,
if, make adjustments to make sure that I was being consistent, with what I am and what I believe. Like, I think a good example is I considered myself to be a Christian up until I was maybe 21 years old. And
mm,
I was like, well, am I really a Christian? Like, I was driving home from work one day and I was just thinking about this. I was like, I don't think I can honestly call myself a Christian because I don't go to church. I haven't embraced any aspect of Christianity.
mm,
I haven't, brought Jesus into my life or my heart or anything like that.
mm,
And I probably should, to be honest, but uh, I don't know. It was a pretty important moment for me, and it was just thinking to myself while I was driving home in my car that
mm,
I was just like, yeah, I can't say I'm a Christian. I'm just gonna have to tell people the truth.
mm,
That I don't know what's true. you know just acknowledging that I don't know
yeah.
was you know uh kind of hard.
Yeah, and it's always going to be.